Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DI 101 webinar series. I am Jared Evans. I lead the marketing function for Distribution International. If you are new to this webinar series, first, welcome. And I will tell you that this is an incredible resource offered to Distribution International customers, partners, and associates. By partnering with our manufacturers and our industry experts, these webinars deliver informative presentations about industry trends, new technology, new products, and product applications. We are extremely excited to partner with Johns Manville for today's webinar. The topic today, the unique characteristics of plenum spaces have resulted in highly specific code requirements to help protect building occupants in the event of a fire. As system designers aim to balance cost with performance, understanding which materials are permissible in plenum spaces is key. Let me introduce our presenter. Brian Pickner is the Market Development Manager for Johns Manville. He has been in that position with JM for 17 years. He has a total of 25 years of experience in the industry. His prior experience comes from Sangoban Performance Plastics as a general manager and from the old Thorpe Products Company, which has some Distribution International ties. He has a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from Purdue University. We are proud to have Brian and the folks at Johns Manville today, and we certainly thank them for their time. We will answer questions at the end of the webinar. To submit questions, please use the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. You can submit your questions at any point during the webinar, and we will answer them at the end. Without further delay, I will turn this over to Brian Pickner with Johns Manville. Brian?
Thank you, Jared. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on insulating combustible piping in plenum spaces. My name is Brian Pickner with Johns Manville, and I will be your presenter today. Next slide, please. Just a quick formality regarding our disclaimer. The information being provided in this webinar is not to be used as a substitute for professional engineering design and/or documentation required by building code, contract, or applicable law. Please refer to the manufacturer's specific application guides, instructions, and guarantee requirements on all projects. Well, thank you to Distribution International for inviting Johns Manville to present in today's webinar. As mentioned, my name is Brian Pickner. I'm a Territory Market Development Manager for Johns Manville, covering the Midwest geography. I've been with JM for 17 years, focused on promoting mechanical and HVAC insulation products, and I reside near Cleveland, Ohio. My contact information was shown on the slide. If anyone would like to follow up with me today after the presentation with any additional questions or comments, please feel free to do so. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're about to talk about code requirements, but before we get into the codes, let's talk about exactly what a plenum space is. By definition, an enclosed portion of the building structure other than an occupiable space that's being conditioned that is designed to allow air movement and thereby serve as a part of an air distribution system. Plenum spaces in buildings tend to be those out of space, out of mind kind of spaces that, because they're typically be hidden behind ceiling panels and or below floors. That being said, they're incredibly important building components. Plenum spaces are designed to house HVAC systems, computer and telephone network cables, and piping runs. They're also utilized to provide pathways for return airflow for HVAC systems. While they may seem simply like a convenient way to hide unsightly ductwork, piping, or cables, they actually create a unique environment in the building that system designers have to carefully consider when designing the building. Next slide, please. Why you should insulate pipes in plenums. There's a variety of different reasons, none more important than the other. Freeze protection, energy savings. Many are done for process control. Condensation control to prevent your pipes from sweating. Fire safety, which will be our primary focus today, and personnel protection. The current code requirements Per the 2015 and 2018 IMC, or International Mechanical Codes, say that materials exposed within plenums shall be of a non-combustible nature or shall be listed and labeled as having a flame spread index of not more than 25 and a smoke index of not more than 50 when tested in accordance with ASTM E84 or under a Writer's Laboratory 723. Now, the exception is if combustible materials are fully enclosed with one of the following: either a continuous non-combustible raceway or enclosure, which are many times composed of gypsum board, or the materials are listed and labeled specifically for installation within a plenum. Next slide, please. Listed and labeled, what does that mean? Listed means that a recognized third party outside of the manufacturer has tested the material, and then labeled indicates that this testing has been indicated on the packaging that the product is shipped in and or the material itself. Next slide. The current code requirements are, again, they're done for various reasons: for thermal protection, cost consideration, building design requirements, engineering design, different governmental requirements, and our focus today on fire protection and the 2550 fire hazard classifications being non-combustible or being non-combustible. Next slide, please. The 2550 fire hazard classification rating is determined by comparative testing per the ASTM. What you see here is a picture of our actual test facility near Denver, Colorado, where the ASTM E84 states that materials are placed in a 24-foot long tunnel and then exposed to flames at timed intervals. It's a comparative testing, so the comparisons are made to incombustible cement board that has a flame spread index rating of 0 and a smoke developed rating of 0. And that is compared to the other end of the spectrum, combustible red oak, which has a very high rating of 100 on flame and 100 on smoke. By industry and code council consensus, then, a 25/50 fire hazard rating has been designed or has been designated as a general fire safety requirement for those materials in a plenum space. Next slide, please. The materials are placed inside the tunnel. The last slide showed you the tunnel. This is the inside of that tunnel. And the test for surface burning characteristics is measured in here. The flame spread needs to be less than 25 to be inside of a plenum, and the smoke developed needs to be less than 50. Next slide. For combustible pipes in a plenum space, that means that fully enclosed material within that space needs to provide a 1 or 2 hour rating if there are specifications in there that require that, such as the UL standard for fire stop or for penetration and fire stops, the ASTM E119, and the ASTM E814, which is a standard test method for fire test of penetrations and fire stops. So you have two types of situations. You have either a requirement for a 1 or 2 hour fire rating, or a simpler requirement for just a 2550. Next slide, please. Why do we protect combustible pipes? The main reason is occupants in the building. Protect the occupants by providing sufficient time for those occupants to exit the building. Structures are very expensive. You're protecting the buildings and the utilities within, and then you're also reducing the fuel available for fire by covering these combustible pipes. Next slide, please. There's many types of pipes that don't meet 2550. Most of them are plastic in nature: PVC, CPVC, high-density polyethylene, polypropylene. The majority of these are used for either domestic hot or cold water pipes, and then ABS pipe that typically is more of a drain waste piping. Next slide, please. Plenum wrap. Plenum wrap, next slide, please, is an inorganic fire-resistant blanket with a scrim-reinforced foil facing on both sides. You see a picture of that. It's sold in a roll form. Next slide. This is a graphic of what a plenum wrap might look like over a pipe in a plenum, whereas you have your pipe, you have a single layer of the plenum wrap, you have your banding or wire to secure that insulation to the pipe, and then there's a 1-inch overlap that is required for every piece that is applied. Next slide. In order to install it, first you have to cut the plenum wrap to fit the perimeter of the pipe, adding no less than 1 inch for overlap. You then use aluminum foil tape to seal the cut edges of the encapsulated wrap. You have to make sure that that wrap is kept encapsulated even after cutting it. And you temporarily secure plenum wrap on your pipe with filament tape. You add an adjacent piece of plenum wrap, making sure to overlap at least 1 inch at both the circumferential and longitudinal seams. So both around the pipe and the length of the pipe, you have to make sure there's that 1 inch overlap. There's an alternative installation method where it's called checkerboard, and you install the second piece of plenum wrap approximately 22 inches from your first piece. And the reason why you do that is that plenum wrap typically comes 24-inch. You need that 1 inch overlap on each end. So you leave a 22-inch space in there. They're going to come back and apply the middle layer in there, leaving a 1 inch overlap on both sides, and then securing it temporarily with filament tape. Next slide. After you've done that, you'll permanently fasten the wrap with either steel banding or 16-gauge wire, as shown in the picture. Next slide. Here's a picture of plenum wrap partially installed over PVC pipe in a plenum. When to use the 2550 rated material. Now this is not 1 and 2 hour rated. This is when the requirement is simply for 2550 rated material. And this is where Johns Manville fiberglass pipe insulation comes into play, where it can be used in plenums. The JM materials that meet the 2550 fire hazard classification and are approved for use over combustible pipes and are both listed and labeled include Microlock HP, which is our standard fiberglass pipe covering with an ASJ jacketing, and also our Microlock HP Ultra, which is our ASJ jacketing with a poly coating over the top. And then also the Zeston PVC jacketing covers and fittings that go over the pipe covering as a further protection. Next slide. Installing fiberglass pipe covering. Here's a graphic now of the fiberglass pipe covering where you have the same pipe in a plenum. The yellow is your fiberglass pipe insulation. You have an all-service jacket with a self-sealing lap. You have butt strips that go around the piping. And then you have your self-sealing lap along the longitudinal seam. Next slide. Installing fiberglass pipe covering is a fairly simple process. You have your self-sealing lap that's designed to adhere the jacket to help create a closed system that prevents your vapor drive, and you see pulling back of the release tape. Next slide. Open your preformed pre-slit pipe insulation, place it on the plastic pipe, allow it to close. Next slide. Remove the release paper from the self-seal lap. You can see the paper, the self-seal release paper being released in this picture. Next slide. Once that's adhered, then the self-seal lap must be pressurized by rubbing firmly with a squeegee. This must be done The adhesive that's on there has to be friction activated. So this is a step that must be taken. Next slide. Pipe insulation then comes with butt strips, and these are sealing the circumferential joint between the two sections. You can see a butt strip here in this picture. After the sections are installed, you remove the release paper from the butt strip. You're going to apply it between the two sections shown here in this slide. Next slide. After that butt strip has been applied, you also pressurize that by, again, rubbing it with a plastic squeegee or perhaps the back of a knife to ensure that positive closure. And you're done. Next slide. Here's a picture of the completed fiberglass pipe covering in a plenum space. Why use alternatives to plenum wrap? Next slide. Some items to consider. The product has to be fabricated before installation. Plenum wrap, as we've shown in a few previous slides, there is a process that you have to go through in cutting it, taping it, and applying it that with the fiberglass pipe covering comes in pre-cut sections, and they're simply applied to the pipe covering. Plenum wrap may also not sufficiently insulate pipes that condensate or freeze. Plenum wrap, many times used in a plenum, is a ½ inch thick and may not meet the R value that's required to prevent condensation on pipe. There's cost considerations between the material and also the labor involved in installing plenum wrap versus fiberglass. And getting in and properly inspecting plenum wrap after it's been installed can be a challenge. Next slide, please. Estimating the cost of fiberglass, fairly simple process. You simply, however many feet of piping that you need to insulate, the price of the pipe covering is priced per foot. So 10 feet of pipe covering is going to be your cost to insulate 10 feet of plenum piping. When you look at estimating plenum wrap, it's not impossible. It's just a little more complicated. You have to make sure that you calculate the plenum wrap in a length sufficient to wrap completely around the perimeter of the pipe, plus include that overlap of not less than 1 inch. A box of plenum wrap is typically 24 inch by 50 feet. You have to cut that into sections to go over your piping. So for example, if you take a 3-inch pipe, each cut piece will have to be about 16 inches in length. And the way you calculate that is you take the diameter of that pipe, which for a 3-inch pipe is 3.5, multiply it times pi, 3.1416, and then add your overlap. So in this case, for a 3-inch pipe, it would be approximately a 16-inch piece. So a 16-inch piece now of plenum wrap will cover a 23-inch section of piping in the plenum. How you figure out now how many pieces of pipe you can insulate per box of plenum wrap is you take the entire length of the plenum wrap in that box, which is 25 feet or 600 inches. You divide it by the size of each piece that's going to be needed to go over a 3-inch pipe. In this case, it's 16 inches, and you get 37. So you can get 37 sections out of a box of plenum wrap times 1.9 feet, which is the 23 inches that you're going to be insulating at a time. So 37 times 1.9 will give you approximately 70 feet of linear feet is what you're going to cover a 3-inch, size 3-inch pipe out of one box of plenum wrap. And you can do this for any size pipe that you have. The conclusion is both materials have their place in plenums, but when you multiply the hour rating is not necessary, but when the multiplier rating is not necessary, fiberglass pipe insulation can be a much more economical alternative. Microlock fiberglass pipe insulation is listed and labeled for use in plenums. It has a 2550 fire rating. It's easier to install. It offers insulating performance and a more economical solution. Plenum wrap is also listed and labeled for use in plenums, but where the multi-hour fire rating is not needed, the contractor may want to look at microlock fiberglass pipe insulation as being an alternative in those applications. We do have additional, that concludes today's presentation. We do have additional resources that are available on our website, and you're more than welcome to go visit those and learn more about these products and the uses they have. Thank you very much for your attention, and I believe we'll take some questions now.
Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate that very informative presentation. We do have a few questions submitted, and just a reminder to people, if you do think of questions, you can use that questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel and submit them. The first question I have here, Brian, is, are Microlock HP and Microlock HP Ultra both approved for use over combustible pipes and plenums?
Thank you for that question. Yes, absolutely. Either one can be used. They're both listed and labeled. And if anybody needs the documentation for that, we have that available and can easily email that to anyone.
Great. Next question, can Zeston PVC be used in plenum spaces?
And it commonly is, yes. The answer to that question is yes. We do have the same documentation on that. I personally use that myself on multiple occasions where we've successfully, a job may be spec'd using plenum wrap, and we've been able to use fiberglass pipe covering as a more cost-effective alternative, along with the Zeston PVC, so yes.
Great. Next question is, what kind of applications have fire ratings rather than flame smoke requirements?
It's typically pipe penetrations through fire hour rated assemblies. And these assemblies, including the insulated pipe penetrating the assembly, may need to have this 1 or 2 hour requirement. So when that's the case, the plenum wrap is the appropriate product to be used in that application.
All right. Next question. What's the difference between Microlock HP and Microlock HP Ultra?
That's a good question. The Microlock HP has an ASJ jacketing on it. It's a foil scrim craft jacketing. The Ultra product was introduced, I lose track of time, but a couple of years ago now, and it has a poly coated on it. Some people prefer the poly coating. It does give you some temporary moisture resistance if you happen to not have your roof completely enclosed in a building structure. So we are seeing that there is a lot of contractors now that are using that pipe covering.
All right. Next question we have, why can't metal foil be used over the plastic pipes, as that has zero smoke and flame?
I'll pass that one off to John Elberum, if he's available.
If I understand that question correctly, with metal foil isn't going to provide any insulating value. It might have a 0 flame and smoke rating, but it doesn't help with condensation control or insulating the pipe to keep temperature constant or near constant for a process.
Okay. Next question. Are there any future plans to develop a pipe covering product that would meet the multi-hour requirement?
This is John again.
I don't believe
that question.
Go ahead. Sorry, John. Yep.
I don't think so, just because there are products in the market like that, the fire hour wraps. And Johns Manville at one point in time did have a fire hour wrap, but that technology and that type of product went to a different company that's actively manufacturing it now.
Okay. Alrighty, that's all the questions that have come through. Thank you guys for your questions. I appreciate it. Thanks again to Brian and everybody else with Johns Manville for partnering with us to do this informative webinar today. Thank you everybody else for joining. To find out about future webinar topics, please follow us on LinkedIn. We post those topics regularly, and you can go to distributioninternational.com. Under resources, you'll see a link for the DI 101 webinar series, and you can actually register for us to send you direct email invites as these new webinars are scheduled. Thanks again, everybody. Please stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.